In her arms, she gently carried two small children who had been swept away by the wave. She brought them to the beach and placed them safely in their father's arms. Then she spoke in our language, her voice resonant yet full of sorrow. "I did what I could to save as many as possible from the wrath of the sea," she said. "I have watched your people suffer and felt your anguish. Let the heavy losses you suffered today remind you how fragile life is." The day started like any other in my little fishing village along the coast. I woke before sunrise to the crowing of the roosters and the laughter of children playing outside my hut. After a quick breakfast of yams and fried plantains, I gathered my nets and poles and headed down to the shore to begin my day's work. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the surface of the water. I pushed my canoe into the gentle surf and began rowing out to the deeper waters where I knew the fish would be waiting. About a mile offshore, I cast my nets and settled in to wait. The morning passed uneventfully. As the sun rose higher in the sky, schools of silvery fish began filling my nets. Before long, I had a respectable catch piled in the bottom of my canoe. I decided it was time to start heading back to the village. I was halfway home when an unexpected storm blew in. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, blocking out the sun. The wind picked up, whipping the surface of the water into white-capped waves. My little canoe pitched and tossed on the building swells. I gripped the sides, struggling to maintain control as waves crashed over the bow, threatening to swamp the overloaded little boat. The shoreline was still a good distance away. I wasn't sure if I could make it back before the strengthening storm capsized me. Just when I had lost hope, a dark shadow passed beneath my canoe. Looking over the side, I caught a glimpse of a beautiful woman's face peering up at me from beneath the churning water. Her long, flowing hair floated around her head like seaweed, and where her legs should have been was a sleek, powerful fish's tail. I gasped in shock. The creature gazing up at me was Egugo, the legendary mermaid who was said to dwell in these waters. Though no one from the village had seen her in living memory, she featured prominently in local folk tales that had been passed down for generations. As I stared wide-eyed at the mermaid, she reached up and took hold of the prow of my canoe. With a mighty kick of her tail, she began pulling me through the towering waves back toward shore. I clung to the sides of the canoe, amazed and thankful for Egugo's assistance. In no time, she had brought me back to the beach in front of my village. As the bottom of the canoe scraped against the sand, I looked back hoping to see the mermaid one last time. But she had already disappeared below the waves. I dragged the canoe onto the beach and unloaded my catch, my heart still pounding from the close call at sea. The storm raged on, but I was safe on shore thanks to Egugo. I said a prayer of thanks to the mermaid who had rescued me. Later that evening, once the storm had passed, the villagers gathered around a fire to swap stories. When it was my turn, I told them about my encounter with Egugo. The elders nodded gravely as I described the mermaid's beauty and her act of kindness in saving me. "Egugo has protected this village before," the oldest fisherman grunted. "My grandfather told me tales of her coming to warn people here of impending storms or driving fish into their nets during times of famine. We have not treated her well in return." He went on to describe how years ago, some of the villagers had hunted Egugo, believing her scales and meat would bring them luck. When they managed to spear her and drag her onto the beach, the mermaid cursed them before escaping back into the safety of the waves. From that day on, storms seemed more frequent around the village and catches grew sparse. As I listened, I realized Egugo had ample reason to let me drown today. But instead, she showed me mercy. Perhaps she hoped to make peace between our people. In the weeks after my rescue, I made offerings of flowers and fish at the edge of the sea, hoping to communicate my gratitude to Egugo. And I told the children stories to teach them that the mermaid was a friend to be respected, not feared. The years went by, and life carried on as normal for my little fishing village. Then came the day I will never forget. The day Egugo returned to save us all. It started off like any other, clear skies, calm seas, and a rich bounty of fish teeming in the shallows. The entire village was out in our boats, bringing in catch after catch. Suddenly, without warning, the water began churning violently around us. A deafening roar built from the open ocean beyond the inlet, leading into our sheltered bay. We had heard tales from travelers of rogue waves, massive walls of water capable of splintering wooden ships, though none of us had encountered one before. But there was no doubt that was what we faced as an enormous wave, easily 30 feet high, came barreling through the inlet straight toward the fleet of tiny fishing canoes spread across the bay. We had only seconds to react. I dove from my canoe and swam for shore. Behind me, I heard the wave crash down, demolishing boats and dragging my fellow villagers into the churning vortex of water. I crawled onto the beach and turned helplessly to see if any other boats had survived. But debris was all that remained floating on the now calm surface of the bay. A few other swimmers staggered ashore, but most of our people were lost. Our village was destroyed. As we stood in shock and grief, a familiar face emerged from the sea. Egugo swam into view, her expression mournful. In her arms, she gently carried two small children who had been swept away by the wave. She brought them to the beach and placed them safely in their father's arms. Then she spoke in our language, her voice resonant yet full of sorrow. "I did what I could to save as many as possible from the wrath of the sea," she said. "I have watched your people suffer and felt your anguish. Let the heavy losses you suffered today remind you how fragile life is. Do not waste another moment on revenge for past wrongs. Instead, move forward together in fellowship. Be wise stewards of the plenty you are given and kind caretakers of the seas which sustain you." With those words of wisdom, Egugo slipped back beneath the waves. We never saw her again after that day, but her message took root as our village rebuilt and life gradually returned to normal. We honored Egugo by becoming caretakers and protectors of the sea, taking only as much as we needed and ensuring fish populations continued to thrive in the bay. Years later, the legend of Egugo is still passed down around evening fires. The children listen in rapt wonder as I tell and retell the story of the day the mermaid saved us all. For she taught us the destructive power of greed and wrath, but also the incredible resilience of hope and forgiveness. Thanks to her intervention, our village lives on in harmony with the ocean to this day. So now you know the legend of how Egugo the mermaid saved my community many years ago. We will be eternally grateful for her selfless actions and wise teachings that fateful day. She remains a symbol of the grace and mystery of the seas which surround our little village. And her story serves as a reminder that we never know when supernatural intervention may arrive to restore balance and transform our lives. "Egugo! Egugo!" the children exclaimed happily as darkness overtook the daylight.